Welcome to the Life Changing Moments podcast and videocast, where through conversations with physician coaches and others, we offer a glimpse into what happens in the coaching room, demystifying the coaching process while sharing some practical tools that can help make professional life more sustainable, meaningful, and fulfilling. Today, we're exploring a challenge that will feel very familiar to many physicians and other healthcare professionals. Most of us entered medicine to care for patients, yet many find themselves navigating increasingly complex workdays, electronic health records, inboxes, documentation, competing demands, and the constant challenge of fitting meaningful work into very limited time. While better tools and workflows have helped many clinicians, others continue to find themselves frustrated, overwhelmed, or spending more energy on work than they would like. Therein comes our guest today, who became curious about that difference. Why do some physicians seem to thrive when new tools and workflows are introduced, while others continue to struggle despite having access to the same resources? In looking for answers, she discovered that improving the work itself is sometimes only part of the solution. Equally important may be creating space to explore the person doing the work, their goals, values, assumptions, beliefs, and aspirations. So that realization led her to incorporate coaching into her approach, with some intriguing results that we'll explore today. So joining us today is Dr. Sachiko Kaizuka. She's an associate professor of family medicine at the University of Rochester School of Medicine in Rochester, New York. Dr. Kaizuka has been exploring this intersection of physician well-being, workflow design, and coaching, and studied how personalized coaching can help physicians align their daily work more closely with the way they want to practice medicine. That's just one of the things that Dr. Kaizuka studied. She's also doing a lot of work in neuroplasticity, but we don't have time to talk about that today, but maybe we'll bring her back for that. So Sachiko, welcome to Life Changing Moments.
Thank you for having me, Dael. It's so great to be here today.
Yeah. Well, I want to take us back, take me back to just a few weeks ago. I caught wind of a presentation that you did at the annual Society of Teachers of Family Medicine conference that was held last month. And I got wind of this poster presentation that you had presented, and then I saw the title and I said, I gotta talk to Dr. Kaizuka, because it was all about what we're talking about, human factors and ergonomics, and attending to those in a coaching kind of way to improve physician well-being. So I want you to tell us a little bit about how did you get interested in that work and what emerged from that. But let's start with how did you get interested in this work?
I didn't intend to study it for the sake of it, but it was a part of my work as a wellness representative for the department. Mm-hmm. So I joined the faculty in 2016 after spending 5 years in rural practice full-time, getting burnt out, recovering from it. And then I was so determined to bring my work and experience back to the residency because I never got the training about avoiding or recovering from the work burnout. Then at the wellness committee, the chair at that time, Dr. Mike Previtera, he was teaching the concept of human factors ergonomics, which is the framework that other industries such as transportation, aviation, aerospace industries where humans are involved in the system and the operations and safety. And that was applicable to healthcare, but the concept was not explicitly discussed. Then I thought, wow, this makes so much sense. And before that, it was more like the dichotomy of, is it the system versus individuals? Most of the focus was on resilience and mindfulness. And I did a lot of that, right. But it get better. But through that framework of human factors, it made a lot of sense to see that our cognitive energy is a finite resource that we want to budget and use wisely and replete them. And through that lens, I started looking at the system, the department, and the EMR tools, and it made lots of progress with my collaborators and the leadership. And so that was the beginning of it.
Let's step back for just a second, Sachiko. When we're saying human factors, I think what you're saying here for us is the cognitive skills that we have. But there's all kinds of human factors in this work, right? What do we mean by human factors in our work?
Yeah, so broadly, it just means that we are human beings with humanly limitations and advantages. And the interactions between the humans and the system does impact the whole system operations, safety, and also the day-to-day workflow impacts on ourselves as well as we have on the system.
Yeah, got it. And so you brought up the word, our cognitive resources. So what you're saying is that's what we do. We have to use our brains a lot and do a lot of thinking. You said it's a finite resource. What do you mean by that? That's kind of that's not the kind of message we got in medical school, that we have a finite resource here. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, exactly. So what it means by that, I think now it's easier to understand because a lot of us use AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when we try to do deep work, we hit the token limits so fast. And just like that, when we do some deep or complex work, we spend a lot of our cognitive energy, and that's not endless. That's not infinite. We wake up every day feeling either well rested or still sleep deprived or fatigued. So we have certain amount of cognitive energy, and then we go into work, and then so many things happen, and then each decision, each interruption uses our energy differently, a bit similar to hybrid cars versus gas car, and how often you hit the gas and driving efficiently versus erratically. And that can also impact how focused we can stay in, how much energy we have. And there are lots of things that we just cannot skip, such as the complexity of the patients. How do we make diagnosis of heart failure, for example? At the same time, there are things that are wasting our cognitive energy, such as frequent interruptions or inefficient sort of workflow or redundancy in the computers or just the procedures within the clinic, for example.
Yeah. So let me just kind of, in my simplistic way of thinking, we have our cognitive skills are finite on a day-to-day basis. I was just talking with a family doc last night, and she said, the older I get, by about 3:30, I get really, really tired. And, her brain is tired. And so I think what you're saying is so we put in some things to assist in workflow to reduce that cognitive load so that we can put more energy on where we need to be putting that energy. But sometimes that our adaptation to those workflow tools, we're either not using them well, or they're not using them at all, or they become a burden to us. And it's just adding to that cognitive load, which gets us exhausted by 3:30 in the afternoon. Am I getting that right?
I think so, yeah. And it's a system thinking. So there are many parts to this. In abstract, it's like just knowing or remembering, I guess. Yeah, our cognitive energy is not endless. That's why, and because we are human beings, so we get tired by the end of the afternoon. Yeah. And it's not just us. There are studies showing later in the afternoon, the judges make harsher decisions. And they don't want to put too much thought into it. Maybe not, consciously, but just the brains get tired. So it just turns the mode into more fast, superficial, and that's just how our brains are designed to conserve energy that we have.
So let's bring it up to the work that you studied. And this is wonderful that you're coming from this from a lens of how do we improve well-being or fulfilling, work. And what you and I talked about before is you identified, we have these workflow things in place to be helpful. But what you notice is that it wasn't helpful for everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, let me take a step back. So as a wellness rep, and I also became an informatics specialist for the department to improve the workflow to reduce the cognitive load on the clinician. And so we prepared lots of standardized tools so they didn't have to each personalize the setting. And then we also, as an institution, started using the AI scribes. And so we had lots of tools and educational resources, but like you said, it wasn't helping everybody. And so I was wondering, what's the missing link? And then I started talking to people, and they had various sort of pain points of why they weren't able to sort of utilize the tools effectively. And it was more than just the technology itself. So I thought maybe by using the human factors ergonomics principles and combining coaching, we can narrow down to the personalized friction points, pain points, and help them kind of getting out of the stuckness.
So tell me a little bit about how you learned when you sat down with somebody, how you learned about what their human factors issues were that might be getting in the way.
Yeah, firstly, I want to know what their problems are. And because it's not one size fits all, and tell me what's going on, and what would you like to see happen? And many of the times it's like, oh, there are too many notes to close, and I don't have time after going home, or I get too many MyChart messages, like patient portal messages, and I just don't have enough admin time. And so initially, the problem seemed to be more like something that happens outside of them. And then I asked them, okay, help me understand how does it happen? Walk me through the process. Most of the time, the clinicians who struggle are very conscientious, hardworking. They want to take care of the patients fully each time, each person. But with the constraints of time and the energy we have, they just have found it too unmanageable. And so then I point out this concept of human factors that, we have finite cognitive resources each day, and talk about like a concept of budgeting the cognitive resources. If we can only work until this time, what would the work look like? And also, what is the best way of saving our energy? When is the best time to sign the notes, for example? It's immediately after, because we know task switching uses more cognitive energy. And when we are interrupted, then we are like, oh, okay, what was I thinking? Just like when you have that brief moment of interruption. So it becomes more concrete actions that they can start looking into and changing, rather than like a broad, this is too much.
Yeah, so if I hear you right, the physicians were very conscientious, and they felt like they had to do, I'm guessing, you didn't quite say this, but and I can identify with this myself, I feel like I have to handle everything that's in front of me with this patient all today. And of course, even though I know that that's impossible, there's a piece of me that says, I still want to try to do it anyway. And then, like 2/3 of the way through the day, I just am exhausted from trying to do all that. Plus, there's all the things that you have to have cognitive energy for, like your notes and all the other things that we do on a day-to-day basis. So you bring up this concept of your cognitive energy is finite. How do you want to budget this? What's been your response to the people you worked with when you ask that question, when you bring up this concept of budgeting?
It seemed to resonate because this is not about their level of competency or conscientiousness or work ethics, but it just simply is. It's like, how much money do I have today? Or how much cognitive energy do I have today?
Yeah.
And
when the money's gone, the money's gone. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. So what are some early changes that people would make with that concept?
Yeah, the early changes often entail no closing. And people who didn't find the AI scribes very helpful initially often found it too different from what they really wanted. And so they would just not use it because they didn't like how it wrote the notes. But then, there are some techniques like personalizing the styles, like bullet points versus simplified styles, and sort of negotiate what's good enough. And that also includes just reminding ourselves of what the roles of the notes are, because we tend to be perfectionistic. Without some element of perfectionism, we wouldn't be where we are. But then when unchecked, it can really get us spend so much time on perfecting each note, and then, ending up taking a lot of time and energy in our personal lives. And that really becomes a vicious cycle. So, and reminding ourselves of the purpose of the notes, and also reframing, is the perfect note done a week later better than just documenting what you just did at the end of the day? So if the patients go to ED or go see somebody else, they know immediately what we did, versus if the notes aren't done, even though they did a lot in the visit, they can't really tell, is that really good service, good patient care? And people who struggle with no closing are all very conscientious. So when they hear that also helps them reframe. Oh, timely notes may not be a bad thing, even if they're not long and perfect.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. So when people have this awareness that, I'm really, where I've been working hard is because I want to get the quote unquote perfect note. I want to get all the details in there. But that may not be what's actually useful for the patient. And it's certainly using up a lot of my cognitive energy. So going from what is the saying? Don't let perfect get in the way of progress, of good enough. So great. So that's one cognitive reframe, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what else what are some other examples? So for example, if I were observing you with one of the people that you were working with, what else might I be seeing that from a coaching perspective? If I'm in the coaching room, what am I seeing?
Yeah, just taking a step back from the actual note closing discussion, I really try to focus on identifying what they want and why. Because when the goals are clearer with the strong purpose, then it's easier to let go of some of the things that are getting in the way. And most of us come into medicine to connect with people, help people, and not to spend so much time on writing perfect notes. So and many of the people I help have little children, babies, families. So they are handling a lot of responsibilities. And so when we reframe this as, okay, to achieve what we want, what kind of things can you let go of, or can you reframe? So it's not just letting go of the perfectionism, but we say no to certain things, like too much perfectionism, to say yes to what truly matters.
Yeah. Dr. Kaizuka, could you take us through, without naming a name, can you give us an example of somebody that you coached through this process? What were some of their goals, and how did you help them move through this in a coaching kind of way?
Yeah, one person I coached in my pilot project that I presented, she was struggling really hard, managing her notes, clinic volume, and in-basket management. She was very serious, hardworking, but she was feeling things were unsustainable. And then we checked the workflow and her belief about what she thought she needed to do. And then each thing we just, discussed. Do you really need to do that much? What is the shared expectation among the team members? And then she realized that a lot of what she thought she had to do was not really shared understanding with other team members. We were in the same team and we were like, why are you doing so much?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then it got her thinking, oh, did I not have to do this much? And so each time we would find the friction point, we would just discuss this. Is this really like the rules and regulations versus what we believe we have to do? And so just kind of peeling one layer at a time, untangling the hairball one hair at a time. And then each time, each step, that created more space and compassion for herself. Oh, I can say this is as much as I can do by messaging. And it's better for you to come in and get checked out. Or this note is good enough. I'm going to just sign this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. One of the things you point out so well is this concept of the way things are, and then we're kind of over here with our beliefs about the way things are, the way that we're supposed to behave, even though it may not necessarily match with reality. But they can sometimes be deeply held beliefs, and we can be pretty resistant to letting them go. But it sounds like you do, like this is what happens in coaching. You did a beautiful job of exploring what's important and then exploring the belief and saying, so it sounds like you believe such and such. Where did that come from? Because the reality is over here. And so when they realize there's this gap between here's what I'm doing, but that's not really necessarily what's expected, then they can kind of close that gap. And so it's a beautiful illustration of some of the things that happen in coaching. And I know that you and I spoke about some other people that you worked with as well, with some similar kind of examples. What I think a lot of people would be interested in is that are listening or watching this. So what you studied this? What were the results of this? What did you notice as a result of your coaching?
Yeah, so the people I helped last year for this project, they all improved their same-day note closure rates, as well as reducing the off-hours EMR usage. And not only that, their subjective overlap between their ideal workflow and the current workflow increased pretty steadily. And their well-being index score, the measure of how burnt out somebody is, also decreased steadily. And the impacts lasted after the brief 2 or 3 months of coaching periods. That shows that they kept using the principles and the approach and kept, balancing their lives, honing their workflow, and then checking their, belief and the reality. And so I'm very, very pleased.
It's been sustained. I saw the data was that months after that, those what was it? I think you said like 4 to 5 sessions, I think was the average coaching sessions.
Yeah. 4 to 6
And
or
then
7.
months after you stop those, actually the well-being score continues to improve, and also all the workflow stuff continues to improve. There's still a trajectory for both of those, so it didn't flatten yet, either one of those. So they have integrated into themselves their own way of reshaping their beliefs as well as how they interact with the human factors with the workflow. That's coaching. So well done. That was awesome. That's great. So tell me what's next with this. I realized that was a pilot project. What's going to happen going forward for you?
Well, I was going to expand this EMR coaching while I try to offload my informatics technical work. But then the handoff got postponed to a year from now rather than soon. So I will continue to coach clinicians, physicians who are willing to do this on a small scale. And eventually I want to do more of it. And maybe if people feel more empowered and capable, I hope they share their learnings with their peers or the trainees that they work with, mentor, so that they can spread this coaching human factors kind of way.
What just occurred to me, Sachiko, is in my healthcare system before I retired from the clinical work there, whenever we had new electronic health records, there was people got quickly labeled super users. And those are the people, I don't know if that's true there, but these are people who really kind of were rapid adopters. They really learned how to use things well. So you could go to them for assistance in how to make sense of everything, how to find things, all that. But again, all that is a tool. And it would be interesting to see if the super users could also incorporate some of these questions that you've developed, some of this approach with, here's how to do it. How are you doing with that? You look like you may be struggling still. What's going on and what are your goals? So it could be an interesting train the trainer model and have the super users actually be trained in looking for people who are not adapting so well to this like you did.
Yeah, I would hope so. Now I'm considered a super user, but I wasn't always like that. I'm not very tech savvy. So my family finds it so comical that I'm known to be like a EMR super user. But I became that through coaching when I was burnt out before I came back. So when I was burnt out, I read Dyke Drummond's book, Stop Physician Burnout. He's a physician coach, right? And then it said, stop being an EMR hater. Learn from the super users. And I did realize that I was hating it. I was like loathing EMR. And that attitude wasn't helping me because every time I would see it, I was like, ah. And so that mindset shift was so critical. And I think a lot of the super users just don't have that adversarial relationships with the new technology and EMR, so they can kind of be curious and jump in and then master the skills.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, some people are like that because they're just naturally, they have an affinity for it. But there's a quality that you were encouraged to bring, which was how can you be open to that which is going to be a part of your workflow anyway? So how can you shift your attitude towards that from, I love that what your coach said to you, you're an EMR hater. And you're going to always hate it. It's always going to be difficult unless you kind of shift that in some way for yourself. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah. Sorry, if I may add one more thing. There's a way to measure the task load, NASA task load index, and it shows you what kind of things can add the sense of the task load. And, it's like time and, physical demand, how successful things went, and then how complex the task is. But one of them is like emotional frustration and that sort of thing. So when I get frustrated with workflow glitch or things people don't do as expected, and I go, "Arr," then I ask myself, is this something I want to use my precious cognitive energy for? And if not, I'll say to myself, it's not worth my energy. I'll just let go and focus on what I can control in this chaotic session kind of thing.
Excellent. Boy, I'll tell you, that comes up so often in coaching with physicians, which we do at MD Coaches, is that whole concept of identifying what do I have control over and what do I not have control over, and letting go of that which I don't have control over, and embracing what you do have control over, and then doing really well at that which you have control over. That's really neat. Well, Sachiko, thank you so much for being a guest today with us. That's excellent work. I mean, I really love that you start small with this. How can I be helpful on this human level with people that are having this the love-hate relationship with the workflow that was there to be helpful to them? How do we explore with them what is that's getting in the way for you with the stuff that's actually been pretty helpful for a lot of people, and learning about what beliefs are getting in the way. And then once they're aware of those beliefs, as well as this idea of cognitive, a cognitive bank, if you will. What I am encouraged about is it isn't just the system saying, here's all the stuff, go do it anyway. You're actually saying, we can do this, and we can figure out ways to do this with our finite resources, and we can go home at a reasonable hour, and we don't have to do pajama time work. And good enough is good enough when we remind ourselves what's most important. So, with all exactly what you said earlier, the approach to well-being isn't more yoga classes and meditation classes, although those are beneficial for people, for everybody. That's not the approach. It's the in the trenches. What's getting in the way? What's exhausting you? What's creating the burnout? So wonderful contributions, and I wish you the best of success as you are moving forward with scaling this in a bigger way for all of us. So thank you once again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning into Life-Changing Moments. If you enjoyed this episode, then please give us a rating, a thumbs up, or a subscribe. Doing so helps our show meet more listeners. If you have something to share, drop us an email at info@mdcoaches.com. Join the conversation today.